Whatever. I borked it, but I fixed it. It'll be fine.
Hello and welcome to the channel, where I turn video games into glass. Happy Halloween, which means it's time for a horror-themed video. This is my own version of the nurse from the Silent Hill franchise. I'm doing something a bit different here, and I'm making two versions of the nurse. One that is the usual style, and the other is a layered version. The white bandages will be the second layer, and will add more depth. This idea was suggested to me by someone online. If you see this video, you know who you are. The bandage layer will be soldered, not superglued as I've done previously, on top of what I call the dead flesh layer. I'll go into more detail about this later. I use regular scissors to cut up to the paper pattern outline. Then I use 3-bladed scissors to cut out the actual pieces.
Okay, so I already kind of borked cutting out the paper pattern. This one is for the layered version of the nurse, and I've already borked it by cutting out some of the pieces before I realized what I needed to do for this one. This one's gonna be the base layer, where all the white pieces are gonna be the bandage layer, which will be the top layer. But for this one, I only need to cut out the eye, so I had to tape all the pieces that I cut back together, and I'm just gonna cut out this part. I guess technically I didn't even need to tape this one on because this will be a different color. Whatever. I borked it, but I fixed it. It'll be fine. For the dead flesh layer, I was thinking this glass would work the best. It's an opaque gray glass, so no light will be able to pass through it. But I figured this would be best for the bits where the dead flesh kind of pokes out. And then for the bandage layer, obviously white. For the hat, I only have this much glass left. This grayish glass. This is the same glass that I used for the Prey Neuromod, and I only have enough of this for one hat. I don't know. Actually, can I get another one? Oh. Alright, well, maybe I can actually get both of these on. Okay, so I may be able to get two of the hats out of this. I didn't know if I was going to have enough for them to both be the same color, so I had this gray in case I ran out of that gray. This will be my backup plan if, for whatever reason, one of these pieces breaks.
I glue the pattern onto the pieces of glass using Elmer's glue. I use a ring saw to cut the complicated or oddly shaped pieces that would be difficult or impossible to do by hand. I mentioned in my Resident Evil video that I don't like horror things, including movies, books, TV shows, and some video games. Therefore, I had a difficult time deciding what horror thing to turn into stained glass. I've never played any of the Silent Hill games, but I've seen gameplay and have a general idea about the theme of the games. When I looked up which version of the nurse to make, I couldn't really find an image in-game that I liked. I initially used an image from a collectible figure I found online, but I couldn't make it work within the limits of glass and my own skill. I decided to only make the nurse's head, which meant I had to look up images and stare at the thing when drawing the pattern. I did have nightmares for a couple of nights, so that was great. I tried looking for glass that might match the features of the nurse's head, but wasn't able to find anything that matched enough. The final drawing looks more cute than scary, but I think it is still recognizable enough. Still counts as horror though, so that's what I'm going with. To drill a hole into the glass, I use a Dremel. I use a container filled with water and a piece of wood. The wood is to make sure I don't drill into the container and create a mess with the water. The water is for reducing the dust and keeping the glass cool. I start at a 45-ish degree angle and slowly bring the Dremel to a vertical position. I don't apply pressure to the Dremel because too much pressure will break the glass. The weight of the Dremel itself is enough, and will allow it to drill completely through and not break the glass. To widen the hole, I move the Dremel in a circular motion. It takes longer to drill through thicker glass than thin glass. And yes, I know the water is nasty. This piece of wood is old, and has all sorts of who knows what in it. It works for what I need, and that's good enough for me. The grinder is used to smooth out the cuts and refine the shape. I have a habit of leaving a little more glass on the edges than I should. It's mostly because I want a little more wiggle room when grinding. While it takes longer to grind, it is better than over grinding. Once I am happy with how the pieces fit, I wash off the paper and glue with water and dish soap.
Alright, so far everything looks pretty good. So the idea here is to attach the bandage layer, which are the white pieces, to the sides of the dead flesh layer, which is the face. So I did my best to match up the edges of the white pieces to the edge of the face, because that's where they will be soldered together. The bandage layer will be soldered separately, and then at the end I will attach it to the face layer. The face, hat, and eye are all one layer. So in total, this nurse head will have 2 layers, while this one will be the usual way I do glass, where everything is one layer.
Copper foil is wrapped around the glass and pressed down with burnishing tools to ensure a snug fit. For complicated or odd-shaped pieces, hand foiling is the best method, since I don't have to fiddle with the table foiler. An X-Acto knife is used to cut the corners to fold the foil onto the edges, though I can sometimes get away with just folding the edges over. Before I foil complicated or odd shapes, I put small pieces of foil on each side to prevent the glass from showing if the foil splits. This is called saddling. Foil will split if a curve is too sharp and leave exposed glass. Though what counts as too sharp kind of depends. If I'm unsure if the foil will split, I saddle it anyway just to be on the safe side. An X-Acto knife is used to trim the saddled foil so it lines up with the regular foil. I use push pins to make sure the pieces won't move before I can tack them together. I use 60/40 tin lead solder to stick the pieces together, applying flux before I solder. The flux allows the solder to bond to the copper, otherwise the solder won't stick. Once all the pieces are tacked, I remove the push pins and continue soldering. I make hooks using copper wire and attach them to be able to hang the piece once it is finished. Hooks are soldered in a joint because the weight of the piece is on the joint and not the edge. For smaller, lighter projects, you can get away with attaching hooks to the edge, but not on heavier, larger projects. In previous videos, I used superglue to glue layers of glass together, so I thought I'd try soldering the layers together instead. But this requires me to do some things out of order. I need to wash everything, patina, and wax it before I solder the layers together. I've never done this before, so fly by the seat of my pants it is. When I put the 2 layers together to see how well it fit, I realized I had a problem. The back of the bandage layer is flat because it needs to be flush with the glass. However, only one part of the bandage layer actually sat flat with the dead flesh layer. The other parts had a sizable gap. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but if the gap is large enough, the solder will drip through and be stuck between the 2 layers. In order to lessen this gap, I decided to solder copper wire to the edges of the bandage layer using the same 20 gauge wire that I use for attaching hooks. It worked, but it's not pretty. I think I might need some larger gauge wire for stuff like this in the future. Once everything cools down, I wash the finished project with water and dish soap, then dry it off. I use a patina made specifically for lead that will change the color from silver to black. I patina and wax the first nurse like I usually do, and was only going to patina the areas on the second nurse where I didn't need to attach the layers together. But then I said, screw it, I wanted to know if solder will stick to patina. Spoiler, it doesn't. Another challenge is being able to clean in between the 2 layers. I need to leave a small gap, so cleaning between the 2 layers is easier. I think a pipe cleaner would be able to get between the 2 layers, depending on how large of a gap there is. This is why I patina and wax both the front and back of each layer before attaching them. Trying to get patina between the layers as well as cleaning the excess off would be too difficult. The bandage layer had a slight problem, in that part of it was loose and started to bend. there wasn't enough support near the bottom since the solder area is small, and the fact that the back is flat, not beaded, meant that it was going to start bending very easily. I figured this would happen and accepted it because I knew I was going to solder the layers together and that it wasn't going to be able to move. I set up my clamp so I can get a better angle for soldering the layers together. And this is where I learned that solder doesn't stick to patina even with flux on it. To fix this, I needed to remove the patina, and this is where steel wool comes in. I don't know how fine this steel wool is, but I've heard that 0000 is the type that is recommended because it is the finest quality and is ideal for removing bits of stuff without gouging the solder or copper foil. I use whatever quality I have to remove the patina so the solder will stick. It looks ugly as sin, but not a complete disaster, given that I've never done this before. Superglue is definitely the easy method, but it is useful to know how to solder layers together. Now I can patina and wax the soldered areas again. I'm actually really happy with how these turned out. I know you couldn't tell which is the layered nurse and which is the flat nurse from a top-down view, but the showcase at the end should make it very obvious. Despite the pain in the butt soldering the layers together was, I actually really liked it, even learned some things too. Though layering glass does make the overall project heavier. I'd be willing to try soldering layers together for future videos too, where it makes sense. Since the gray glass is opaque, there wasn't much point in showing the layered nurse in front of the window since light can't pass through. For the other nurse, it was cloudy and the light doesn't show through very well. So here it is in front of a light source. Both of the nurses were front heavy, which is why the fishing line is hanging in front of the glass and not behind it like it usually does. Like, share, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you would like to see me make down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all through the next pane.